Tov. Today's daf yomi is Nazir daf Mambei is Nazir 42. We're going to start on the top of 42a at the top. So we start with an earlier statement from our Gemara. Amar Mar v'kulam shegilchu shelo b'tar. Let's say if all these cases where the person cut their hair, but they cut their hair without a razor, meaning to say one of these three categories of the people who are required to get a haircut, i.e., the Nazir at the conclusion of his Naziris, or at the conclusion of his Nazir Tumah, or Mitzora at the conclusion of his purification, or the Levium on their day of their inauguration into the service. In all of these cases, if they cut their hair without a razor, or if they left behind two hairs, they've done nothing. It is an insufficient cutting. So Amar Rav Acha Ravika Zoso Meres. So Rav Ravika says we can learn from here a general principle throughout the Shas, Rubo Kukua, that if you just have the majority, if you do the majority of something, it's as though you've done the whole thing. And we can learn from here that this principle is Midioraisa. This is a biblical principle. That even though perfection is attainable, you don't have to get the whole thing. Just Rubo Kukuo, majority is good enough. And how can we learn that from here? Mimai, what's our source? So he explains, says Rav Acha Ravika, Midigali Rahman Agabe Nazir by Yom Hashvi Gachano, from the fact that the Torah tells us about a Nazirite on the seventh day he shall cut his hair, meaning to say that it means to say that from the fact that the Nazir is, we say in this case, in this case of the Nazirite, he needs to cut off all of his hair. And if he leaves behind two hairs, it's insufficient. But in general, the majority of it would be as though you did all of it. So that's his principle. So Maskafa Rav Yossi Bar Chanina. So Rav Yossi Bar Chanina says, I don't understand you. Hi ben Nazir Tamek, if you want to teach me a law about Nazir from that verse, but that verse is written by a Nazir Tameh. It's not written by a Nazir who completes his Naziris and cuts off his hair. It's talking about a Nazir who's cutting his hair after his purification process for becoming Tameh. So he says, why are you bringing me a proof that a regular Nazir has to cut off all the hair from his head from a Nazir Tameh? So the Gemara says, when Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina taught this, they laughed at him in Eretz Yisrael. They said, Nazir Tameh to Bitar Minoan. They said, no, the two laws are interchangeable, because how do we know that a Nazir Tameh, that a Nazir cuts his hair after his impurity, that he's supposed to use a razor? Nazir Tar, if we learn that out from a Nazir's Tar. So if that's the case, Lacy Nazir Tar, Nazir Tameh. So let's learn out that a Nazir Tar has to cut his hair from the law of a Nazir Tameh. Avad, just like a Nazir Tameh, if he left behind two hairs, he's done nothing. So too by a Nazir Tar, if he's left behind two hairs, he's done nothing. So Abaye asked the question, Nazir shegileach v'shir shtei saros. So let's say the Nazir cut his hair and left behind two hairs. He hasn't done anything. He's not done enough. But then his hair started to blossom. His hair started to grow. His other hair that he had cut off, the chazar v'gilchan, and now he goes back and cuts the two hairs. What's going to be the law there? Mima akfi olo. Do we say that his hair was sufficiently cut? Because he did actually cut off all the hairs, but at one time he didn't do it. So do we say that he's done enough or not? Rather than answer that question, the Gemara asks another question. By Rava, Gemara asks another question. Rava asks, Nazir shegileach v'hiniach shtei saros. Let's say there's a Nazir who cut off his hair and left behind two hairs. V'gileach achas v'nishra achas. So Nazir cut his hair and he left behind two hairs. And then what did he do? He cut off one hair, and then one of the hairs fell out. What would be the law there as he cut off all the hairs? So Rav Acha Midifta says to Ravina, I don't understand your question. Gileach Sara coming by the way, is your question is, does he cut off one hair at a time? Well, of course that would be okay. So Ella Ema, so that's not what Rav is asking, but Rav is asking about the following. Nishra achas v'gileach achas mahu. Let's say he left behind 2 hairs, and then the first hair fell out. He didn't cut it, and now he cuts the second one. What would be the law there? So he says, I don't understand that question either. Giluach en kan, seir en kan. So he says, well, there's no giluach en kan, seir en kan. He says, well, there's different ways to read it, but it seems to be saying that if there's no cutting of the hair here, then because there's no hair. So he says giluach en kan because there's no hair, because there's no hair over here. So the Gemara says, well, well, if you're going to say that there's no hair here, but then there shouldn't be a fulfillment of the mitzvah of giluach. If you're going to say that there's no hair here, then how has he fulfilled the mitzvah of cutting the hair? So the Gemara says, no, hachikamer. This is what Rav is saying. Even though there's no hair, mitzvahs, even though there's no hair at all on his head, nevertheless, since the first hair fell out, we're going to say mitzvahs giluach en kan. He hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah of cutting his hair, because you need to have, when you cut your hair, 2 hairs. And so therefore, when he cut the first hair, there were 2 hairs. He left it back, so he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. And now when it comes to the second one, there's only 1 hair. And so therefore, he can't fulfill a mitzvah by cutting less than 2 hairs. So therefore, he hasn't done enough. So if the first hair falls out, then he has to wait. He hasn't been able to fulfill the mitzvah of cutting the hairs. He has to wait for, presumably, all of his hair to grow back before fulfilling the mitzvah of giluach, of cutting the hair. Now we're up to, now I was thinking that the principle of rubo kukua, the majority, is like all of it. It's a very important principle for us to remember, a spiritual principle, that sometimes we strive for perfection when it comes to spiritual service of Hashem. We can never achieve the full perfection, obviously. So we have to recognize that it's a concept in Shas, rubo kukua, majority is like all of it. Sometimes if we're only just able to do the majority of it, let's say we're not able to have kavanah for every single word of the prayers, but we could have kavanah for the majority of it. That's rubo kukuo. That's majority is like all of it. So now we're up to the next Mishnah. Nazir chofef, the Nazir is able to shampoo his hair, umefasves, and he's able to rub his fingers through his hair of a low sorek, but he cannot comb his hair, because if he combs his hair, presumably the hair will fall out. So chofef umefas, that's why people have to be careful not to brush their hair on Shabbos. So chofef umefasves, if a person is shampooing or rubbing their hair, that's permitted, but the hair might fall out then too. So the Gemara says, so money, Rabbi Shimon, our Mishnah must be like Rabbi Shimon, who says, davar she'emes kavin is mutter. He says, if you do an action, but it wasn't your intention, you violate a halacha without intent, then it's permitted. So the Gemara says, really? Of a low sorek? But it says, but you're not allowed to comb your hair. There, it's certainly not your intent to pull out the hair. You want to make your hair look nice. Well, that's following the position of Asan or Rabbanan. That's following the position of the Rabbanan, who say throughout Shas, davar she'eino miskaven, if you do something without intent, it's prohibited. Do you mean to say Reisha Rabbi Shimon was said for Rabbanan, that the first cause is Rabbi Shimon and the next cause of the Mishnah is Rabbanan? It's not logical to assume that. So I'm a Rabba or Rava, depending on the Girsa. Kula Rabbi Shimon. Hey, the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon who says something without intent is permitted. But if you're combing your hair, you're brushing it, you are intending to remove the hanging hairs, the dead ends. And so therefore, for sure, you intend. That's not something without intent, that's something with intent. And so therefore, that's going to be prohibited, even according to Rabbi Shimon. Next Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel says, Lo yachuf ba'adama. Rabbi Shmuel says you're not allowed to do this chafifa, this shampooing with earth, because that's actually removing the hair. So the Gemara says, Ibalahu. Gemara asks the question, how do we touch up this Mishnah? Do we say that if you remove it with earth, it will remove the hair? If you shampoo with earth, it will remove the hair, and that's why it's prohibited. Or maybe because there are some earths that do remove the shampoo, and therefore we can't remove the earth with other shampoo. We can't shampoo with other earth because of the type of earth that does remove the hair of the gezerah. And the Gemara says, well, what's the difference with how we read our Mishnah? So, for example, could go into Ika Dama Dolo Masra. Let's say there's a type of earth which you know is not going to remove the hair. Now, but if you say that you can't use earth because it always removes the hair, if you know that in this case it won't remove the hair, that would be okay. But if you say that you can't remove the earth because there are some earths that do remove the hair, and you can't use earth as shampoo because there are some earths that do remove the hair, and so therefore this is a gezerah. So then then you can never use it because the whole concern is that you might come to use the earth that sometimes removes the hair. So therefore, Gemara says teiku. We're going to leave this question unresolved. Some say that the teiku is not really the lashon of that's proper here, and so leave this question without a teiku. That's some gears. So now we're up to this next Mishnah, which is going to bring us into the laws of Truma and Tahara. Nazir shows say yayin kol yom. Let's say you have a Nazirite that he was drinking wine the whole day. Eino chayav ela achas. He's only going to be liable for one set of lashes. Amru, but let's say they warned him each time. Al tishta usho. Let's say they say to him, don't drink wine, don't drink wine. Then we're going to say chayav kol achas v'achas. He's going to be liable for every time he drinks the wine. Let's say he's going to be cutting his hair the whole day. If he's cutting his hair the whole day, then we're going to say he's only liable, the Nazir is only liable for one set of lashes. Let's say they said to him, don't cut your hair, and he still cuts his hair. He's going to be liable for every single one. Third case, let's say he became tameh to a dead body the whole day. So then we're going to say he's only liable one time. Let's say they say to him each time, don't become tameh, don't become tameh. Then he's going to be liable for each and every time. So the Gemara is going to discuss this case about it. This Gemara is going to take up this last case about a Nazir became tameh, then he comes back again and becomes tameh again, and the same day. So in Amaravuna, Mikra Moe Diberakasav. This is the verse speaks fully. This is a full verse, and we'll look here at what does this mean? Mikra Moe Diberakasav. And the Talmud is referring to the verse about a Nazirite in chapter 6, verse 7. It says, that the verse says that for your father, the Nazirite is not allowed to become tameh for his father and his mother. But since it speaks in the full verse, it includes the three different types of ways of becoming tumah from a dead body. The three ways are maga, masa, and ohel: touching the dead body, carrying the dead body, even though you're not touching it, if you're basically carrying it, and also ohel by coming into it by tent tumah. Tent tumah can be done in one of three ways. Either you come into a tent or covering where there's a dead body in it already, or two, the dead body serves as a tent over you, or three, you serve as a tent over the dead body. But now there's another verse, says the Gemara. There's another verse that states, the earlier verse says, all the days of your Nazirus, you cannot come, you cannot come into a room with the soul of the dead body. So the Gemara says, the assumption is, says Rabbi Barafuna, that says Rabbi in the name of Rafuna, that these are two separate prohibitions. One is the prohibition that you're not allowed to come into contact with the dead body, become tameh from a dead body. And then there's a second prohibition in addition to that of olal tumah, that you're not allowed to come into a tent or into a house where there is a dead body. So there's two separate prohibitions. of a tumah. But if you're already tamei, you already touched a dead body once, we're not going to say that there's a separate prohibition from touching a dead body again. Which seems to, by the way, contradict our Mishnah, which our Gemara is going to come back to. Rav Yosef Amar Ha-Elokim. Rav Yosef takes an oath. He says, I swear. Amar Rav Huna, Afilu Tumah v'Tumah. Rav Huna says that even if you touch a dead body and then later you touch a dead body again, you're going to be in violation of a second prohibition. The Amar Rav Huna, Nazir Shaya Ome B'Beis HaKfar. So let's say there's a Nazir who's standing in a cemetery. Voshito Lo Mace. Voshito Lo Mace. So let's say Nazir is standing in a dead body, and they handed off to him his dead body, Umeis Acher, and another dead body, meaning to say he's already touched one dead body, and now he's touching another dead body, Vinagabo, and he touched it, Chayev, he's going to be liable twice. So Rav Yosef says Rav Huna is not consistent with what Rabbah said in the name of Rav Huna. Rabbah said in the name of Rav Huna, and once you touch one dead body, you cannot become tamei from just touching another dead body. And Rav Yosef is saying that Rav Huna says, you are. Amai hamatamei b'kayim. So Rav Yosef says, why would Rav Huna say you're tamei again in that case? Aren't you already tamei? Alav shma minah. So we must learn that we see from here that says Rav Huna, Rav Huna, that even if you're tamei and then you become tamei again, then we're going to say that you can become, you're in violation of a second prohibition. So Abaye challenges his Rebbe Rav Yosef. Abaye challenges Rebbe Rav Yosef. Again, his Rebbe Rav Yosef is telling us on Mem Beis on the Beis, in the middle of the page, his Rebbe Rav Yosef said that if you're tamei and then you touch another tumah, according to Rav Huna, you're tamei twice. Abaye challenges this. So he challenges it from the fact that it says in the following brisa, Kohen Shaylo Meis. Let's say there was a Kohen with a dead body, Munach Seifo. Let's say Kohen has a dead body placed on his shoulder, Voshito Meis O Meis Acher, and then he reached out and he touched another dead body, Vinagabo. Yachol Yechayev. I might think he's liable. Tam Omer V'lo Yechalel. Kohen is not allowed to defile himself. That's the prohibition. This refers to somebody who is not yet tamei. This comes to exclude a person, a Kohen who is already tamei. So we see from here that the Kohen who's already tamei is not in violation of the prohibition of touching a dead body because he's already violated it. So he's not violation twice. So we see from here that Abaye says to Rav Yosef, how can you say he becomes tamei twice when we have this brisa that says he's not tamei twice? So Rav Yosef responds to his student Abaye. Rav Yosef responds, our Mishnah contradicts you. What does our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah says, if you're touching a dead body all day, you're only liable once. But if they gave one set of lashes, but if they say to him, but if they warned you each time, don't become tamei, you're going to be liable each and every time. But why aren't you already tamei from the dead body? So we see from our Mishnah that you are tamei each and every time you touch the dead body. So this is a direct question against Rabbah in the name of Rav Huna. So it shows you, Abaye, that you're liable each time. So our Mishnah is in conflict with the brisa. So we see from here that the Mishnah and the brisa are contradicting each other. From the brisa, we see that if you touch another dead body, you're not going to be liable a second time because it says lo yachol, but from the Mishnah it says you are liable a second time. So we see from here that there's a contradiction. So our Mishnah is contradicting you, Abaye says Rabbi Yosef, because our Mishnah says you're liable each and every time, whereas the brisa says you're only liable once. So Abaye responds, Kasha. So Abaye says, no, it's not difficult. It's not a challenge from the Mishnah to the brisa. Khan on a brisa that says that you're liable only once, it's talking about a case Bechiburin, because you were carrying the Kohen was carrying the dead body there. So since he's holding it already, you're not going to be liable a second time because you're already holding it at that time. And so therefore he's only liable once. Because when he touched the second body, he wasn't adding anything. Aval, Shalom Bechiburin. But the Mishnah that says that also from Tumah to Tumah, you're liable twice. It's where he's not holding the second dead body at that time. And so therefore, when he touches the second dead body, he's going to be adding something on, because as we'll see that if you touch a dead body, while you're touching the dead body, somebody touches you, they're going to become tamei it's going to be considered like their tumas mace. And so we see from here that that's a distinction between the cases. So that's why the Mishnah says that you're liable each and every time because you weren't touching the dead body at the time, whereas the Brisa says you're only liable once because you were touching the dead body at that time. So the Gemara says, "V'tumah b'chiburin d'oraisa." Do you mean to say that if you are touching the dead body and somebody else touches you, that they're tamei for 7 days? Do you want to say that that is a biblical law? Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef. So Abaye is challenging the answer, or the Gemara is challenging the answer that Abaye gave, that there's a distinction between chiburin and shalom b'chiburin. And if you're touching the dead body, then you're able to transmit tumas d'oraisa, and that's the reason why you're not going to get a separate set of lashes, because you're only getting once, because when you touch the second body, you're not adding on anything because you're already in a more severe state. Whereas when you touch the second person, when you weren't touching the dead body, after he stopped, meaning to say that when the Nazir become tummy a second time, when he wasn't touching the dead body, then he's adding on, because at that moment, if somebody else will touch him, he'll make him tamei meis. So this teaches us that there's this biblical concept of tumah b'chiburin. So the Gemara says, do you really want to say that tumah b'chiburin is d'oraisa? Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yanai, or Amar tumah b'chiburin, ala tumah v'kachim. Why do we say that there's this concept where if you touch a dead body and somebody touches you, that they're tamei meis? That's only by truma and kachim. Then you have to wait 7 days before eating the truma and the sacred food. Avo Nazir v'oseh Pesach. But in the case of Nazir and somebody who makes a korban Pesach, we're not going to say you're tamei for 7 days. And if you're going to say it's a biblical law of tumah b'chiburin, that while you were touching that body, you make somebody else tamei meis, ma'ishna. What will be the difference? Mar explains, kam b'chiburei adam, kam b'chiburei adam b'meis. So the Gemara says, well, if the person is actually touching the dead body, then he can transmit tumas meis d'oraisa, then he can transmit the tumah of touching the dead body, biblically speaking. But if he's just touching another person who himself is touching a dead body, then it's going to be rabbinic. So the Gemara says, aval tumah v'tumah lo, dam v'taimei v'kayim. So the Gemara says, let's challenge this distinction that Abaye said according to the opinion of Rabbah, because Abaye said in the opinion of Rabbah that if you were standing there and you were tamei, tumah v'tumah, that if you're standing there and you're already tamei, and then we're going to say, when do you transmit the tumah again? Then when are you liable for second set of lashes? That's only in a case when you're not touching the dead body at the time. But if you're already touching the dead body at the time, and then you touched another dead body, then we're not going to say that you're liable a second time. That this idea of tumah v'tumah, that's only talking about a case where tumah lo, that you're not going to be liable a second set of lashes. That's only in a case of chiburin. He's not adding anything, tamei v'kayim, but because he's already tamei. But nevertheless, tumah and bia coming into the tent at that time, like for example, if the dead body's on his shoulder and he enters into a tent, then Rabbi would admit that you get lashes twice. So Gemara asks, but why? Tumah bia nami hamitame v'kai. He's also tummy in that case. So it says Rabbi Yochanan, kam b'bayis, kam b'sada. So he says it's two separate scenarios. One is in a house and one is in a field. So this is an important scenario, a distinction, but we're going to pick this up, God willing, in the next daf. Let me explain the schedule. God willing, we'll